It's that time of the off season where it's time to have some fun with the Phoenix Suns. We're talking statistical highs. Who will score the most points? Who will make the most threes? And what lineups will be the best for the Suns this season? Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we're back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 6 seasons, a writer at Suns.com, and the host of the Just Basketball Show wherever you get your podcasts. A big thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen to start your week. Happy Monday. We are back. It's August. Wherever you get your podcasts, we are there for you. Just search Locked On Suns, including on YouTube, to get this show in your feed every single Monday, Wednesday, and Friday throughout the month of August. We'll be back to daily starting in September as we get closer and closer to Suns training camp. So become an everyday or get locked onto the Suns simply by subscribing to this show. That's my job, and we will take you along for the ride. Joining us as he does every Monday is Brendon Dueñas. He is a writer at Brightside of the Sun. We're going to be talking about an article that Brendon wrote about the 5 best, most interesting lineups that Suns fans can look forward to in the upcoming season. So we'll break down 3 of those 5, but we're going to start with a game of sorts where we are going to guess who is going to hit the high among the Suns players in a given category and what the total will be in that category. So obviously we're going to start with scoring. Who is going to score the most points and what will that scoring total be? I want to remind everybody first that today's show is brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Make every moment more by visiting FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. All right, Brandon. So I will toss it your way. Points. Which Suns player will have the most single game points this season, and what will that scoring mark be?
Yeah, so this one's pretty interesting because this time last year, I mean, obviously Booker is the only answer. It's just a matter of how many. Now you have 2 other guys along with him that could go off for 50 plus, maybe 60 plus at any given moment. Like, pretty sure Beal's career has 60. So you have 2 guys that can light it up, and then we're not even talking about Durant. So, I mean, this is the most interesting question to me, but I think I'm going to go with Booker. I just think he's going to have one of those nuclear nights where he ends up going for 59. That's my guess because he always, for whatever reason, gets stuck there. So I'm just going to roll with 59 for Booker in some game against like an Eastern Conference team on the road, because that's when he always seems to pop off. So I'm going to go a little more specific on that one. I don't expect you to guess the game he does it in, but I'm going to go with Booker 59.
I do actually have some more specificity in the blocks and steals in terms of kind of the context that it might happen in. With points, I hear you on the road East games in like November, December. Those always have been Book's strong suit. And so it would not surprise me. He did have that big Bulls game this past year. He had the Jazz game, the Jimmer year, where he got up there, and those were both at home, but he does tend to play really well on the road. I, similar to you, looked at that 59 number, looked at the fact that breaking 60 he doesn't have a single number of scoring in the 60s. He has the 70, and then he has a bunch in the 50s. So I actually said 60. I think he gets there this season, and I do agree with you that he's the guy. I thought about Durant pretty hard, but a lot of this, when you're talking about accumulating totals in stats, it's also minutes, right? And so that was part of it with some of the bench guys that I thought about for other categories, and some of the, even this one where I'm like, I just think night in, night out, Book's probably going to be playing the most. So it's going to be easier for him to get there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I have a question for you. Do you think with these 3 guys, are all 3 of them going to hit 45 plus at one point separately this season?
Well, I mean, that can take us to the next category, actually, because for 3-pointers, I had Beal at 7.
Okay.
I believe his high is, I think it's 9. I think he has a game where he made 9 threes. I don't see him doing that just because I believe that game was in the 2021 season when he averaged 30 plus and the ball was just in his hands so much. So that's a combination of pull-ups and spot ups and everything else. I don't know if he'll quite get the opportunities to get 9 threes in unless he just went like 9 of 10 from it. But I mean, a 7 3-pointer game for Beal, like that's already 21 points. So I don't know, 45. I would say that they at least all have a 40-plus point game. But honestly, as much as I'm saying that, I think back to every night in the NBA last year, it felt like guys were crossing 50. So if that just keeps up across the NBA, then you're probably right. Maybe they all go for 50. I don't know.
Yeah, and I feel like 40 was not a given because it's tough for 3 players on the same team to do that. But that's why I jumped up to 45 just to make it a little more interesting.
Wait, are you saying in one game or just over the course of the season?
Just over the course of the season separately.
Okay.
Just all 3
I was
going to
say
45 plus.
If we're talking about all in one game, like 30 is like a good one. I want to make sure I was answering right. All right. What did you have for threes?
So threes, I went a little higher than you. I went with Beal and Utah both having a 9 3-pointer game at separate points of the season. But I feel like they're just going to get some clean looks. Like these are 2 guys that knockdown shooters with the spacing that they're going to have with Durant and Booker. I feel like they're going to have each separately just some absolutely bonkers shooting nights with clean looks that they're not used to, especially Beal. So I feel like Beal could have a 10-3 game, honestly, if you know, look at all the shots Shamet had that were wide open that he was missing. So I mean, plug him in that spot, and I think he has a chance to tie his career high.
Make the case for let's talk about Beal. You just brought him up, so you kind of did make the case. But the point that I want to put back to you is his 3-point attempts per 100 possessions. The 2019-20 season, he was at 11, 8 the next year when he's an all-star. I believe that's the all-NBA year for him as well. Last 2 seasons ago, 7 threes per 100 possessions. He's at 30% total. Get my numbers crossed. And then last year, 6 threes attempted per 100 possessions, and obviously shoots it a little better. So that would be what makes me nervous, is that adjustment period for him to take those consistently. And I do think that will be a mindset change because the number's been trending in the opposite direction for, that's 4 straight years now. So that's what would make me nervous. He might have 11 to 15 open threes to take in the course of a game, but is he going to take them all, or is he going to, attack a closeout, try to get to the basket, take a mid-range shot, etc.? That would be what I'm nervous about, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I just think it's going to come down to roll, because like with the Wizards, anytime you're the primary initiator, like we see with Booker all the time, like it's really tough to create your own open looks from 3. So I think the fact that he's going to slot into that, there's some corner actions, like bringing him off screens, moving him around. I think he's going to have more of an opportunity to go back to that off ball where he kind of played with John Wall, and those 3-point attempts were definitely a lot higher back then. So I think we're going to see him trend up in that. Hopefully, we'll see. But if they play him on ball more and Booker's kind of the off ball guy, that kind of balances back out. So that's kind of the thought process behind that. But obviously it's there's going to be some games where those numbers like are a little bit of outliers, and he jacks up maybe close to 23s in a game. If it just depends on who they're playing and how the game flow goes. So that's why I tend to shoot a little higher on these season highs, because there's always those games that kind of stand out and just come out of nowhere. So playing the Rockets or some young team that doesn't defend and just wants to get up and down, you never know.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go quickly through assists, blocks, and steals before we get to 3 different lineups that have our attention heading into the season. All right, so for assists, I had Devin Booker at 12. I believe his career high is like 14 in 2018. That was when he had the ball all the time. I don't think it'll be there, but I still think 12 is quite a bit for basically somebody who is a wing. So that's where I came in. Nothing scientific about that guess, but let me know where you are.
Yeah, so I found it interesting that Booker's career high, as bonkers as he went, was not even higher than both Durant and Beal's career high in assists. Beal's actually at 17. Durant had 16 in 2022 and April of 22.
When was Beal's 17. That's crazy.
Let me see if I can find this real quick. Career. But yeah, 17. That was in 2022, January 1st against the Bulls. So it seems like everyone just loves setting career highs against the Bulls. But yeah, so I found that little statistic kind of interesting. So it kind of changed my thought process a little bit, because I think the defensive attention Durant's going to get, he's actually going to be my choice for this one. I feel like he's going to have a game. I put 15. I think he's just going to have a game where teams just say, we're not going to let KD beat us. And he's going to end up being that facilitator at the top of the key, hitting Beal, Booker, Utah, whoever's in the corners, just knocking down threes and 8 and rolling. Like, it's just, they have such an efficient team around him that I think it wouldn't shock me if he flirted with 15 plus assists again. But yeah, that's where I went on that one.
I have some Durant playmaking thoughts later, but I'm glad you put him in somewhere on this list, because I just felt bad that I didn't pick him on any of these. I thought about him on blocks, which we can get to here next. I'll do blocks and steals at the same time, since I have role players for both. And I wanted to try to mix it up, because obviously blocks, it's like, well, KD's an option, but is he going to get a really, really high number? I don't know. Ayton's never been that guy. I think even if he has a great defensive season, that might not really result in a bunch of block shots, because that's just never been his style. So I went Drew Eubanks, and I did 6. I believe that would tie his career high, but this is one where I had the point in the season specified. I feel like early on in the year, teams are going to continue to underestimate him and challenge him. And I think you could just see a game where maybe Ayton's in foul trouble, or just something happens where he plays 20, 25 minutes and just blocks like everything in sight. And then steals was actually a similar one. So I went Jordan Goodwin, and I had 7. And I think this would be one where he's filling in for injury, maybe Beal, maybe Booker, and the Suns probably switch a little less on that night, and he just racks up steals again, sort of maybe underestimated, or just really able to get into a good rhythm. I don't think that necessarily has to be in the beginning of the year, because I think Goodwin's just a guy who can steal no matter who he's playing against. So those were my defensive ones, just under the impression that the stars maybe aren't going to like go all out in the regular season for stuff like that.
Yeah, no, those are solid. I was thinking about Eubanks too. I think I got a little off the rails here. I just said getting crazy, just saying there's going to be a game in April, garbage time. Bull is going to be unleashed, and he's going to get 5 blocks. So that's what I chose. I think Eubanks could probably match 5 pretty easily too, but I chose Bull here. I think he's going to have a stretch at one point of the year. It might not be early, but he will get some minutes, and some heavy minutes, especially in games where maybe it's against a bad team. They're resting some guys, and he gets a chance to go out there and do bull things, get the whole experience. So that was my pick there. I like the Goodwin pick. I was kind of going back and forth between him and Okogie, but I just went with Okogie and went with 6. I feel like he's just, his ability to be 10 places at once is just how explosive and quick twitch he is as an athlete. Like, wouldn't shock me if he had another just absurd game where he takes over on both ends. So that was my pick on that. But yeah, your 2 were probably my next 2 in line for both those stats. So I think we're kind of in alignment there.
I do think KD on the blocks and Booker on the steals very easily could get there.
Yeah.
Maybe I also just kind of hope those guys don't have to go so aggressively on defense. Maybe it's a bad indicator if they like have to do that. We'll see. We'll talk about all these guys more coming up, and some of these exact statistical performances and categories where they're going to help as we get through 3 main lineups that are the most intriguing to us heading into the season. First, today's show brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook. Football season is kicking off soon, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to win all season long. Right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. Just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and each time, every week that they pile up a W, you get bonus bets back. You can then use your bonus bets on spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. I think the sweet spot for something like this is a team that doesn't have the best odds to win the Super Bowl, but that you expect to be really dominant in the regular season. So good value on the Super Bowl, but still going to win, 10 to 12 games. That's really what you want to do. Maybe a weak division, maybe a great quarterback, something like that. You can use those bonus bets later on as they pile up those W's on spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn. Start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. And take advantage. All right, we're keeping it rolling here. Let's talk lineups. Brandon, I actually think this is the first topic we ever covered on Locked On Suns when you joined me. I think it was heading into the 2020 season. I brought you on when you wrote an article like this back then, shortly after the Chris Paul trade, of all the different combos we might see. So, full circle moment a little bit here. But let's start with what you called the best five. You have that as Booker, Beal, Gordon, Durant, Ayton. Tell people why you expect that to be the best lineup the Suns can roll out. And do you think that will be their normal closing lineup every night?
Yeah. So first off, I'll have to go back and find that article because I remember that. I'll have to see how frequently those lineups were used and if any of them actually, match up with my analysis back then. But
I was going to say, don't look at the episode because I had just taken over the show and it's probably bad. So don't re-listen to that, but definitely check the article.
I'll do both. I won't bring it back up, but yeah, anyways, so the best five. Yeah. I think to me, this is the most talented five. Does that mean it's going to be their best lineup in terms of like net rating or plus minus? Like probably not, because that's usually not how it ever ends up working out on paper. But right now it looks like, just especially offensively, just the versatility. You have so many guys that can handle the ball, so many guys that can shoot, pretty good size too. Like they're a little bit smaller in terms of guarding like those bigger forwards and stuff, but like overall you still have 2 7-footers on the court and 3 guys that have pretty good size that are interchangeable and can shoot. So that's what's really exciting to me. That's why I love the Gordon addition. I think his ability to hit deep threes and really space the floor for 3 elite scorers and an elite finisher. And Ayton, like offensively, has a chance to be, like I said in the article, it's not a typo. I think it could be one of the greatest offenses in NBA history whenever that group's together. Defensively, Gordon closing games, that's kind of where they could offer a Kogi or Goodwin in certain matchups or scenarios, but offensively, it's really tough to find any weaknesses in this group.
So let me just throw the case for Bates Diop over Gordon as the closer. 69% at the rim last year, 40% from 3. Fouled on 16% of his field goal attempts, and he doesn't foul on defense. Solid offensive rebounder at 6'9" with a 7'3" wingspan. And if the goal is pretty much switch a lot 1 through 4 and then have Ayton on the back line, I think Gordon can execute that, but I think Bates Diop will just be an even better version of that. Now, he doesn't have the shooting range that Gordon has. He doesn't have the playmaking ability or sort of driving ability that Gordon has. And neither, obviously, does he have the experience. But it feels like it's going to be one of those 2 guys plus the 4 stars closing most games. Like, is there anyone we're not bringing up who you think could crack one of their best overall lineups or closing lineup?
Yeah. I think Okogie still should be that mix. I'm still on that island over there, Okogie Island. I think he'll have his moments. It's really just about consistency with him and like hitting jumpers. But I think anytime they're playing a team with a dynamic guard or 2 that's quick, they're going to need someone like Okogie, because that's where Bates Diop, he's not really, I mean, he can hold his own in switches if he's on an island against a guard, but he's not someone that's going to disrupt the way a Kogi does or even a Goodwin does. So I think there's going to be an opportunity for those 2 guys in certain matchups to close games. But against bigger teams, I think Bates Diop makes a lot of sense. Gordon, if like I said, if you're trying to get more dynamic offense going, just trying to make a comeback, or like let's say they're down by 10 points and they need to string off a quick offensive burst, I think he makes a little more sense. So that's the one thing Frank Vogel has at his disposal, is like all these weapons that you can kind of interchange and mix and match. And that's what I'm excited to see, how he, like, especially matchup based decision making. That's really the key here.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. We'll talk more as the show goes on. We have a bench mob lineup to hit in the last segment, but I was having trouble finding space for Goodwin the more that I really tried to think about it, because it feels like, I mean, maybe something, training camp wise will obviously go a long way in determining this, but when you just add the experience that Okogie already has, the fact that he is probably a little better and a little more physical in a lot of the perimeter defensive categories, and the offensive rebounding that he brings, I feel like he's ahead of Goodwin, and it sort of seems like only one of them is really going to have a spot in the rotation. And unless Goodwin, it really feels like it's going to come down to his three-point shooting. So we'll see. But that's a conversation to touch back on later. I want to talk about the spacing and scoring lineup here to close out this segment, which you have as Booker, Beal, Gordon, Durant, and Bull. Two lineups in this thing, I believe, had Bull in them, which I respected, but I was a little nervous about personally. So let me just make the case for this same lineup, but with Durant at the 5 with Yuta Watanabe in it. That was what my mind went to, seeing spacing and scoring. And that is that he had, more than half his shots came from deep. He made 46% of them. 52% on wide open threes, 52% on corner threes. If you're just running a lineup out there like that you're just, Booker, Durant pick and rolls, Beal, Durant pick and rolls with 5 out, everybody just spacing, everybody's an elite shooter. I mean, it's about as good as you could put together for a Durant at the 5 lineup offensively.
No, I love that. And I think if Vogel's down for like going smaller, and like the only like drawback, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to have put Bull there for this reason, but like Kevin Durant's getting banged around by like big dudes, that's probably not the best spot for him to be in. That's probably why they're not going to play him at the 5 a ton, but like in certain like stretches, I would love it. I think Durant at the 5, you can get away with in certain matchups for sure. So I think that lineup makes a lot of sense, but it's not like Bull has a ton of, ton more muscle than Durant in the first place. So that was just more of a traditional thinking, like what Vogel might do in terms of spacing. And it's also comes down to like the rest of their centers. No one's really an elite shooter. Like Eubanks, I think he could have his moments where, if he's wide open, he'll probably let it fly, but he's not really, I'm not as confident in his shot. So yeah, I love that lineup. I think Utah makes a lot of sense with the starters in multiple lineups. And if they want to run small ball, like I'm here, sign me up. I'm ready for it.
More on Yuta Watanabe and a bench mob lineup, how the Suns might stagger their stars with their bench. We'll close out with deep rotation talk, some lineup data, and more after one more break. All right, closing out the show. Let's talk about the lineup, Brandon, that you called the bench mob in your article at Bright Side of the Sun, which is the 5 Suns lineups that you're most excited to see, look forward to in 2023-24. That lineup, the bench mob lineup, is Goodwin, Gordon, Watanabe, Bates, Diop, and Eubanks. Just tell me, do you think we'll see an all-bench lineup? Because that was where my mind went first, is like, are there actually enough minutes to go around for them to do that in a real game?
Probably not, but I think, and I hope we don't. Honestly, it's a good sign if we don't see that, because I think they're going to want to keep one of their big 3 on the court at all times, and if not one of them, probably Ayton. It's going to be tough. I mean, there might be some like blowouts or like garbage time, but like if it's a game that they're trying to be competitive in and they're playing the entire bench unit, that's probably not a good sign, I would say. Whether it's, but I think there could be some moments where, like, say, sprained ankle and like, Booker's out a couple of days and Beal and Durant are both on the bench, then we could see those rotations just happen naturally throughout the season, because there's going to be those bumps and bruises like along the road. So consistently, probably not going to see it, but it's just good to know that you have a bench unit that looks, at least on paper, like they could hang and keep you in games. And it's just night and day from last year's bench, I think.
Yeah, it's a good thing about having Eric Gordon, I think, right? I mean, he can morph from being a sort of spacer and tertiary ball moving guy with the starters, or if he is closing games in that first lineup we talked about, great, and you trust him to hold up with the style that type of unit would play. But he also can, in a night where there maybe is an injury or foul trouble or something. And if you need him to score 20 and get you 5 assists and get to the line a little bit, like maybe he has that in his back pocket a few times throughout the season.
Yeah.
I want to return to the Okogie Goodwin thing with this particular lineup, and then we can get into what the staggering could look like. But do you know what the Suns' best lineup by net rating was last year among lineups that actually played like 100 plus possessions? I'll give you a hint. It's exactly what you would guess.
I would guess it was just their starting 5 with Okogie, or like Okogie with that starting unit essentially that they had entering the playoffs.
So that's third, actually.
Okay.
The best lineup was the one that got off to that amazing start at the beginning of the year. Just CP3, Booker, Bridges, Johnson, and Ayton. They were plus 22 per 100 possessions. It's, we're almost a year away from when Cam went down. I mean, that happened early November last year. It's already August, but, it is a crazy what if Cam Johnson never tears his meniscus, just sort of what happens. Because you look at that lineup and you're just like, they were winning, and they were really, pretty dominant. They just didn't have a bench and everything, but that's a more, manageable problem if you just go into the trade deadline trying to fix that and all your guys are healthy. But that's not what happened. And we know everything, the domino effect from there. But just sort of returning to the value of having the bench and everything, I think you're absolutely right. And it's balanced in the way that it positionally makes sense. They even have multiple options that aren't listed here that could get on the court like that in that type of unit if they did go full bench. And even you think about, the white flag types of lineups at the end of games, and you're just trusting you can put your whole bench out there and be fine. It's definitely an improvement on where they were last year. But the basketball index, they have a bunch of good like ratings on skills, not just, stats. And so I went and looked on Okogie versus Goodwin on a bunch of perimeter defensive stats of theirs or ratings, like I said. And Okogie is the 99th percentile of on-ball perimeter defense, 98th percentile ball screen navigation, 91st percentile in both steals and deflections, plus the offensive rebounding. He's in the 95th percentile. So he's pretty much better than Goodwin in all of those categories aside from steals was all that. I mean, they're both elite, but Okogie's just like a touch above him in almost every single one of those. But obviously Goodwin can be a ball handler and probably has the upside of being a better shooter. So I know I mentioned this in the last segment, but which of them, if we're looking at the end of this upcoming season, so fast forward like 9 months from right now, which one of them do you think will have the more impactful season start to finish, and which one will play the most between those two guys?
So I think it's going to be Okogie. I think it's close because like there's definitely reasons, like you mentioned, that the ball handling kind of gives Goodwin, especially on this roster where there's not a ton of, there's like one maybe traditional point guard, and that's Saben Lee. So that kind of opens up more of an opportunity for him. But I also think Okogie's point of attack defense, like you mentioned, like those stats, you could have made them up and I would believe you. That's just the eye test. Just looking at him, he's everywhere.
For all I know, they might have made them up because that site is hard for me to decipher, but they do really good work. So I just trust it.
Yeah. But yeah, I think people are forgetting like how impactful Okogie was at times, like in the regular season. Like if he had a big playoff push and really carried over some of the stuff he was doing in the regular season, like the Suns would not be able to afford him. Like that was a real conversation that I think a lot of people forgot. We're going to lose Okogie because he's playing too well. Like there's a stretch of the season where that was happening. And I think we could see that again. And Vogel loves just players that go 110%, and that's how he plays. So I think the coach is going to love him, and that's going to open up the opportunity. And he's someone that I think is ready to break out and hopefully have a more consistent season. But I do think Goodwin's going to have a purpose as well. But like you said, they kind of do. There's a little bit of a crossover with some of their skill sets, especially when you have as many weapons as we do offensively. So I think it's going to be tough to really play both of them consistently. I don't think it necessarily has to be one or the other, but there's definitely going to be some times where they're going to have to choose.
Yeah, to say it again, I feel like if Goodwin could just make his threes, he'll probably play, and it sucks to kind of have that much pressure. But the good thing is he's under contract beyond this season, and he's still fairly young. I think they both will play. I think they both could even start games, to be honest with you. Like They both could start at least one game, and that would be pretty likely, in my opinion, just based on the place that they are in the depth chart. Even if opening night, maybe neither of them play, it's just going to be like that, I think, for this team with the age of their star players and just the mixing and matching and experimenting that I think we'll see. But let's go to the staggering strategy, I guess. What we expect to see if they don't play a bench mob. And I'll go through some numbers that I was looking up that are kind of affecting how I see this. So last year for Washington, Brandon, Beal plus bench. So I basically sorted it as Beal on and then Kuzma and Porzingis both off. So in some cases, the starting point guard may have been on the court, but for them, that was like DeLon Wright or Monte. So any of those lineups, Beal on, Porzingis and Kuzma off, -4 per 100 possessions overall for the season. They did have one lineup that was Morris, Beal, Kispert, Avdia, Gafford. That was really good, played a lot for them. But I have a feeling that at times maybe that was a lineup that started together. I'm not sure. We know Booker likes to play the whole first quarter. I kind of doubt that changes. I think we might have talked about that already in a past episode. And so I don't think it's going to be either of them. I went into the whole thing before I started looking that stuff up, feeling like Beal was the most likely option, but I'm not so sure anymore. I think it actually might be, obviously, I can't tease it too hard because there's only one more guy left, but I think it might be the third star in that equation who ends up being the kind of bench scorer with second unit lineups. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you nailed it there at leading that. I think it's got to be Durant at this point. He's going to have Eric Gordon to kind of alleviate that. And that's why I think Gordon's addition, which you already got into a little bit earlier, but that was the key of the offseason. It really was the missing piece. It was that last, obviously he's not going to have the same impact as some of the other moves, like, adding Beal and all that. But I think his fit next to Durant makes a ton of sense. And then you look at his relationship with Utah and like how the chemistry they already have, like it makes sense to put him in that second unit. And we saw it last year too, even with Monty. Like, I don't know if how similar Vogel's going to use his lineups, but I think it does make sense to put him out there and give him a little time to like lead and get those, be that number one option, the true number one option. Not saying he's not at all times, but when Booker and Beal are out there, it kind of, I'm not going to say clogs things up, but it makes it to where there's not as much of a chance to get into like that classic Kevin Durant rhythm where he's just the alpha on the court and everything runs through him. I think that's good to get him those reps early in the game. So fourth quarter comes, he feels more in rhythm with everything. So I think it makes sense to have him be that guy.
Well, and to your point about, the rhythm that he can get into with a lineup like that, he's always really, cooked when he gets the chance with groups like that. Like the playoffs in the second round against Milwaukee, that series that kind of showed us that he was back from the injury in a real way. Like, it ended up being a lot of lineups like that because Kyrie was out and Harden was so limited. You had Shamet and Bruce Brown and Blake Griffin and Joe Harris out there with him. And it was just sort of, him one-on-one with spacing. And even last year, I looked this up, the best lineup with Durant on and no other kind of star player on the Suns last year was Payne, Shamet, TJ, Durant, Jock. That lineup was plus 43 per 100 possessions in 30 possessions last playoffs. During the regular season, when he was in Brooklyn before the trade last season, the Edmund Sumner, Royce O'Neal, Harris, Claxton, Durant lineup was really solid. You had, Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, Royce O'Neal, Claxton, Durant, like a lot of these different lineups were really solid for him. And so it feels dumb not to tinker with that. And if it's only for a few minutes at the beginning of the second quarter or something, like it's not going to be this major thing. But if you can consistently win the beginning of the second quarter by 4 or 6 points, like you're just adding up the margin for error for yourself and the likelihood that you're going to win games. So I think I think that's perfect for him. I think he can, if Ayton's in some of those lineups, like he can be feeding Ayton. That's a way to get him involved. I just like it from every angle. Yeah, go for it.
Because their chemistry, it seemed like Durant really went out of his way sometimes to try to get him involved. And I think you can get away with like Eubanks or Metu or whoever with like Booker and Beal and those other lineups where you bring Ayton out early, just tell him go as hard as you can for 6 minutes, and then we're going to take you out and you're going to start the second quarter with Durant and a bunch of shooters. And that could be a very nice rotation to just kind of balance the flow of the game and get both guys in rhythm. So I think that's the biggest thing. This team's going to go through some growing pains, obviously, with anytime you have this many stars working together, you're going to have to figure out what works and what doesn't. But I think if they can get everyone in their own rhythm separately, it's going to make it to where it all comes together at once. So that's really the key that Vogel's going to have to mess with and figure out over the course of the season.
Yeah, I think you could easily see, closing the first quarter with something like, Booker, Beal, Gordon, Watanabe, Eubanks or something, and then starting second quarters with, Gordon, Okogie, Durant, Watanabe, Ayton or something like that. And there's a history of him working in those lineups, the Ayton point of it. I just think from kind of every angle, that makes a lot of sense to keep everybody sort of happy. Maybe Beal comes back sooner than Booker in the second quarter, so then he gets a little bit of time where Booker's not on. It's not always easy to map it out so specifically, but I think as a general idea, that makes a lot of sense. And you're just allowing yourself to have an advantage lineup-wise in pretty much every minute of the game, which sounds obvious. That sounds like a very basic thing, but that's the benefit of having multiple stars is you're just setting yourself up for success there. But that's me piggybacking off of your work. People should go read the article. Any final thoughts on stuff we didn't get to or people you want to return to from the lineup side of things?
Not much other than I'm going to go back to saying offensively, this is going to be one of the most talented groups we've seen in a long time. If they can figure out how to make it click really quick, I'm telling you, this has a chance to be one of the best offenses in NBA history. I'll say it again. So Suns fans should be hyped. It's going to be a fun season. Hopefully everyone stays healthy and especially come playoff time, just, we'll see, but yeah.
All right. Yep. Check the article out, brightsideofthesun.com. And I will be back Wednesday. We'll see what I can cook up by then, and closing out the week with Aaron Edwards as always, as we make our way through August, the down days, of course, but basketball not too far away. Hit follow or subscribe, get the show in your feed every day. Search Locked On Suns wherever you get your podcast to find it. If you're just getting this episode and have not found the show before, and I will talk to you guys next time.